Hi, we're level two. We're made up of 5 students from Ravensbourne University. There's Alistair, who's doing the effects and lighting. There's Edgar, who's doing the backgrounds and environmental modelling. Rebecca, who's doing character modelling and rigging. And myself and Matt, who are doing animation.
Hi there, I'm Rebecca, and as well as modelling, rigging and texturing, I am the team leader of this piece and will be directing the visual aspect of the water babies. The take we decided to go with was inspired by some of my concept art, where we were trying to take the feeling of this children's story and try to make it look like a living illustration, make the textures feel like watercolours, so the entire piece, characters, environments, will have textures which are akin to watercolour brushstrokes. Try and get a nice texture and feel to the piece. To experiment with the proposed idea of the watercolour textures, I made a simple fish model, first in Maya and then took it into Mudbox, where I lightly textured it in Mudbox, and then I gave it to Alistair, who then took it further in regards to the texturing.
Hi, I'm Alistair. I've been in charge of lighting and effects for this project. I originally loaded it up into Photoshop and used paintbrush-like brushes to sort of give it a nice overlay to make it look more like it had been painted rather than solid colours. I then loaded it into Coral Paint and used the watercolour brushes to make the textures seem uneven on both sides, so it looked more like a painting rather than a solid, static, lifeless type texture. I started out trying to simulate water-like textures using the ocean shader in Maya and trying to use lighting on top of it to make it seem more like objects underneath it were underwater as opposed to them being not connected in any way. I also was trying out different things on having it dynamically show things like bubbles underwater rather than them being solid spheres.
Hi, I am Edgar and I am in charge of the environments and the compositing mainly in this project. I done this test with the underwater scene, which is like kind of an Atlantis scene, to try different compositing passes and how we're gonna get that together into After Effects to simulate water, and also like a experiment for modeling and see how it will do, how we get this experiment to integrate in this project.
Hi, I'm Ashley. I'm one of the animators, but I also did the storyboards for the water babies. What really started off the storyboards was the interaction between the lobster and Tom, and what really kind of drove this interaction was the storyboard, the concept designs I saw from Rebecca, which were just having this huge lobster like interacting with this tiny human who kind of looked really scared, but at the same time I knew from the water baby story that he had to actually care for this lobster, and the contradiction between these two feelings that you got from the story really drove how I'd approach the storyboard and kind of have it so that you had these two conflicts of where it starts where you're actually afraid of lobster, but where it ends where you really care for the lobster and what that meant. The reasons behind why I want to go to Bournemouth, they're quite large, but to boil it down, it's mainly to meet people in the industry, because obviously we've been working alongside these people for like the rest of our careers. So we want to have connections as soon as we possibly can and really show off what we can do.
And it'd be cool to meet with other animators and visual effects artists from across the country, not just London.
Yeah, and obviously, I mean, in this kind of industry, it's really important that you kind of learn from each other and grow as a community. So by being introduced to these people so early on, we can kind of see how they've grown as well and kind of evaluate ourselves compared to them. But not so much as just that they're competition, but we can learn from them and what they're doing. But it's also to show that what we can do, because obviously we're very apt students, otherwise we wouldn't be in this competition, or we wouldn't be trying to get in this competition unless we felt secure of what we could do. So we want to kind of show off to everyone else around us what we can really do.
And it'll be a cool and a good platform to develop our skills, especially with the kind of look we want for this project, which is somewhat different and maybe a bit ambitious.
Yeah.
So it'll be a wonderful place to develop our skills and work with this kind of project in this kind of environment.